Hello, great day. My name is Churchwell. I'm Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here at Vanderbilt University and Chief Diversity Officer. We're doing part of a series. We call it This Moment in America. This is our third in a series, and this is the first one in the new academic year, 2021 to 2022. It's an important one. We're going to talk about how to be an ally and its meaning in a time of social justice. You know what we faced in the last year, so we thought it was very timely to talk about that in the context of allyship. What is it? What is it about? Why do we need it? As we all know, 2020 and 2021 have been two of the most tumultuous years in recent US history. A pandemic rocked the world, bringing to light vast inequities in healthcare access and safety, an increase in crimes targeting certain racial ethnic groups, and a summer of protests, all resulting in heightened calls for social justice and awareness. The events of last year and a half not only highlighted the challenges that individuals from marginalized communities face on a daily basis, it also highlighted the importance of allyship and allies. Members from underrepresented groups can never have enough allies. And what's important about allyship is that anyone can do it. But time and again, we have to remind ourselves that simply declaring oneself an ally is not enough. In many of our listening sessions last year, the Chancellor and I heard many times how faculty members asked how they could become meaningful and effective allies. We will examine that question today. Allies, in most cases we're talking about, are our white colleagues. So let's be very, very specific about that. The events of the past year and a half have served as a reminder that there is more to allyship than brief statements of commitment and raising your hand. The phrase actions speak louder than words has never rung truer than in the past year. Here at Vanderbilt, we are constantly searching for ways to use our shared talents, research, and teaching to come together and help us enhance the human experience for all. That includes exploring what it means to truly stand arm to arm with your peers and colleagues. So we want to explore exactly what does it mean to be an ally? And what does meaningful allyship look like? First, we'll hear from Professor Ebony McGee, Professor of Diversity and STEM Education at Peabody College. Professor McGee focuses on her spectacular career on those racialized experiences and racial stereotypes that adversely affect the education and career trajectories of underrepresented groups of color, and has written extensively about a number of topics, including what it means to be an ally to underrepresented groups, particularly the Black community. Next, we will open the floor to the rest of our panelists. They include A.J. Hinton, Assistant Professor of the Department of Molecular Physiology and Biophysics, Slavina Goliva, graduate school alum and postdoctoral fellow at the NIH, formerly of the Molecular Physiology and Biophysics Department, and lastly, PhD candidate in Molecular Physiology and Biophysics, Tiffany Richardson. These three individuals, along with a group of multi-ethnic, racially diverse colleagues, all of whom worked at the Department of Molecular Physiology and Biophysics at the time, came together to create a timeline showcasing Black physiologists dating all the way back to 1837 in honor of Juneteenth this year. This project was undertaken with the care and effort and is a prime example of collaboration and meaningful allyship, and reflects how even basic scientists don't have to carry a banner or march in a parade to manifest social justice. We will begin our discussion with Professor McGee. As noted earlier, you have written extensively about meaningful allyship. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself and discuss your work? What is allyship about? Why is it needed at this time of America? And why do African-American faculty members need allies? That would really be useful to share with us, Ebony.
Thank you so much, Dr. Churchwell, and to my other panelists. It is exciting to be here. I study the racialized experiences and structural racism embedded within STEM culture and STEM education, unapologetically focusing on the experience and lives of Black students, including community college students, but Black students in higher ed, faculty, deans, presidents, et cetera. And I really have moved more to those individual experiences to looking at structural barriers that are impeding the innovation and, productivity of the country, not just those who are most minoritized and marginalized. And as I've been doing a bit of research and a bit of talking across the country, just like Dr. Churchwell said, people are asking, what can I do? I want to help. And I feel like these are genuine, authentic concerns that many white faculty are having. So it's really refreshing to be a part of uh, uh, a movement that is moving towards, first of all, recognizing, we were just fighting for mere recognition that these problems were real. So there's an identification that race and racism is real. It did not stop with Obama. It continues to proliferate even the highest levels of education. So with that, I wrote an article, but I really want to start with the article that Jamie Yu wrote in 2013. It was reading this article that really spurred me to talk about, things that in relation to Black academics. So first of all, I just want to say some people call them allies, some people call them co-conspirators. There's other words out here, and it really doesn't matter what the term is, it's really in the action. So being an ally is a verb. It is something that you do. It's not something that you are. And you have to continually do it, just as we have to continually live within a society that perpetuates race and racism. You have to continue to be an ally. But the first thing, and I'm also going to share a couple of my own experiences. I've had white male allies / mentors, I would say, because they were in positions of power and privilege. And this is really important for allyship, that you give up or share your power and privilege with those who are minoritized. But the first thing my ally mentors did is that they listened, right? So they listened to my unique experiences as a Black woman in the academy and all my levels of intersectional oppression that I may face as a woman, at the time, just broke into the middle class, socioeconomic status, and of course, as an African American, right? So really just coming and saying, look, I've mentored lots of people. I don't quite get what your experience is, but I'm here to listen. And that was really, really important, because we often think of people who are in positions of power really not listening and just, advising and just acting on things, but they knew that they didn't know what they didn't know and saw me as an expert at my own experience. The other thing I think that was important in that article is that ally is just not like a self-proclaimed identity, So, you have some folks who, maybe change their Facebook page to Black Lives Matter, and they're like, yes, I am, it is done, right? And we often call that optical allyship, where you tend to change very benign things about, your social media, or you may even have a poster in your office, but you are not, again, willing to share or give up your power and privilege to help those who are marginalized. And I think about, this kind of optical allyship in terms of the founder of MIT, for example. So Rogers was an abolitionist in the North and a slaveholder in the South, right? So it's not just something that you do to make you look as though you're a diversity queen, or that you're all about the cause. When you go to bed at night, are you still thinking about how you can fight on behalf of those who are marginalized, right? So we don't need optical allyship, because it kind of suggests that you know what is needed to be done, but you will not take that extra step. The other thing is educating yourself constantly. And I know the summer 2020, like of the top 10 New York Times bestsellers, like 5 of them were about how to be an anti-racist. And, I really believe in that type of education, but you cannot read yourself out of structural racism, right? So no matter how many books you read and how much wokeness you think you are, it is really the action, right? Educate yourself so, you don't see anything foul, you don't end up having a moment where it becomes a teachable moment, but certainly you cannot read yourself out of um, the white privilege that you are privileged with, right? So really think about going beyond that. And then, allies, white allies in particular, really can't function in isolation. So it is very rare that I see like that one long older white male ally, mentoring 5 underrepresented minoritized students. It's usually a posse, right? And, if that person has that ideal, they also have friends and colleagues who also share that mission of allyship. So it often goes better when you're not, sort of the lone one. Um, Allies really don't need to be in the spotlight. And this is where I like the term sponsor. So, sponsor, these are people who are advocating for you, working towards your behalf, working towards equitable consequences for you, but it's behind the scenes, right? So, to proudly proclaim one's allyship and trying to be in the spotlight because you have done a few things that you consider to be allyship is not really true solidarity, right? So just wait till the awards come and your the folks that you consider allies, they write you a letter and proclaim you an ally to the world. Then you can come out into the spotlight and enjoy that. But in the meantime, just really focus on doing the work. So this is a really, really, really big point. So I could be I happen to teach critical race theory right now. That's a whole nother workshop for another time. But I always tell my white students in the critical race theory class, I need you to educate your own people or people whose identity that you share. Why? Because I know that I can walk up in my body and say the exact same thing that my white male counterpart says, and somehow I am doing reverse racism and he is woke, right? And I understand that. And I understand the power that white allies who have a sense of understanding the unique experiences of marginalized academics of color can make towards their population, right? So this is what I want them to do, not necessarily prove how woke they are to other minoritized, marginalized folks, even though, some of that happens, but really to go and educate with those who you share an identity with. And then, allyship is not a perfect science, particularly my white male mentor ally came to me about a write-up that was going to be really important for my career trajectory. And it looked good to me, it looked good to him. It did not come across good to the powers that be, right? So instead of getting upset with him, I mean, he shared it with me, we took that as a moment to just let's have a little grace with each other, right? We can't do all these things right? I'm coming into understanding what power and privilege is like. And he's also coming into how to defend a Black woman who does research in race and racism and, how to do it that it can be effective with the powers that be. So you have to, certainly give a little grace for those moments, and it's not a perfect science. So And then I would say finally, what you kind of don't want to do as a white ally is apologize for your ancestors, start crying or just, that guilt. It is really not productive. It really, really isn't. So maybe if you have a lot of emotional energy, you can go home and like share that with your family members, but we don't need the tears. We don't need the apologies. We need to know, okay, now that you know, what are you going to do? Right. So I just think that really kind of set the tone for the particular article called Ready to be an Ally for Black Academics, Here's a Start. But one of the things that I wanted many of my white colleagues to acknowledge is white supremacy, often kind of camouflaged as university politics or camouflage as this thing called fit, right? Or camouflage as us having a conversation that if we push towards equity, we'll be compromising excellence, right? And work to dismantle those myths, those biases that you may have within your own, kind of person, right? And speaking of that, let me jump to implicit bias. Now, implicit bias within itself is not a harmful thing, but the research has determined that, first of all, many university professors do not suffer the greatest amount of bias because of implicit bias. So these are not police officers who need to make a split-second decision whether a stranger, somebody that they've never met before, lives or dies or gets hurt, right? These are professors who can spend long, countless hours with their students, who get paid to think and to know and to grapple with really hefty, racialized topics. What that typically leads to is more like sophisticated racism, right? So implicit bias often doesn't work in that, in dismantling the bias. As a matter of fact, much research has pointed to that there's actually a backlash, right? So I also think that when we talk about allyship, we have to talk about institutional allyship. Like, what are institutions doing to promote allyship within the university ranks? So certainly acknowledging power. And then one of the ways that you can kind of dismantle that academic politics is, let's get rid of standardized testing. I know we did it for COVID, and we still got a diverse, highly efficacious population of students. Why don't we consider dismissing those completely? Because it kind of reifies the white and maleness and upper middle classness that, are populated, that we are seeking to diversify. And then there's the whole service component, right? So if you want to be our allies, please do not say this. We need you because you are the only, insert what only is, only Black man, Black women, LGBTQ, only ably different person, just insert whatever, underrepresentation in. And if we don't have you, we will probably do it wrong. I mean, they don't say it like that. They say it better than that, but that's really what it is. And that is such a tough position to put a Black faculty member in, where they actually believe that they can make significant contributions to that committee. And without them, the committee will be like, just swimming in a sea of whiteness, right? That is a very difficult position to put a Black faculty in. However, when it comes to tenure and promotion, when you are looking at that tenure package, it's like, oh, she did service. It doesn't really count, right? But when the chancellor asks you to do it in the moment, it seems like it counts for everything, right? Like this is it. I just said yes to the chancellor, right? Because it's hard to say no to the chancellor, correct, right? But if it doesn't count for tenure and promotion, we need to understand the repercussions that are resulting from this high level of service work. And then I always say, if somebody says, if they say, well, you're the only Black woman, well, you need to get more Black women. So, I don't have to be, so that should be the focus, not put me on a committee to have, more diversity days, but to actually hire and promote Black faculty. So, and then, in terms of, I already talked about sponsoring and mentoring, but I'm going to talk about pioneerism. So oftentimes, when we first come to an institution, we feel like we have a lot of allies. It feels like everybody is rooting for us. But sometimes they'll say things like this: wow, we are so happy to have you. If you get tenure, you will be the first, fill in the blank again, to ever receive tenure in this department. Isn't that great? And you're looking like, wait, this department is 200 years old, and you're telling me that I would be the first? And I'm sure you had that same speech to others that look just like me, that you'll be the first, but somehow they didn't make it to the first, right? So we call this pioneerism, and it's not good. You just need to go ahead and posse recruit faculty in the department. What I mean by that is, white allies often have their posses. I talked about that a little earlier. Well, Black faculty also need, the strength in numbers, right? A tiered mentoring model where you have one full faculty, one full chaired, endowed, give them all the titles and the power and privilege associated with that, one associate professor and one assistant. So we can stop talking about pioneerism and we can just do it, let's just make it happen. And, really one of the ways that I've seen really successful allyship matches is when folks, particularly white faculty, kind of look in their own backyard, and literally your backyard, like your house. Is it on stolen land? Your name, what is your ancestral pathway to your name? Did your ancestors own enslaved Black people? What about your school? What about the school that your children are going to? Is there something in your own ecosystem that you can unearth that has benefited from white supremacy? And out of that, I've seen people, donate to causes. Nobody's giving the land back. We haven't got to that yet, but I have seen a real emotional, and what I would think is a real change towards trying to move in a more equitable way, right? So kind of looking at your own backyard. And I think the last thing I'll end with is that, nothing is worse when it comes to allyship than finding out my ally, who is a peer, let's say we're more like colleague allies, not mentor allies, then I'm making $20,000 to $30,000 less than my ally. But I only know that if we share our salaries, right? That is a moment of vulnerability, but that is also a moment where my ally and I can go to the dean and say, we notice this disparity. We have very similar records. Why is this the way it is, and what can we do about it? So not just show us the money, but show us your salaries, right? Let us know if we are being positioned in financially oppressive ways or financially equitable ways. And then I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor McGee. Evidently, that was quite profound insight into true allyship. Let us now open the floor to include some of the individuals that inspired today's discussion. I'm going to welcome Assistant Professor A.J. Hinton, Slavi, and Tiffany, who I introduced earlier. We see the Juneteenth Molecular Physiology and Biophysics project on the history of Black physiologists as an example of allyship, in that it brought together a multi-ethnic and multiracial group together in a moment of social justice, playing out in a basic science discipline. How did this occur and why? And I'll direct that to Slavi and AJ first. Slavi, you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. So the poster kind of came from the events that had occurred in 2020 and 2021, where we saw this uprising in potentially harmful events to kind of the students in our department, specifically who were Black and students of color as well. And we have this anonymous poll where Black students had actually expressed not feeling safe in our department due to these potentially harmful events. And so we didn't really feel like enough was being done kind of across the board to address that. And so, you know, we, like, as a student group, there's only so much that we can do. And there's only so much that is within our power to actually implement the changes that we want to see. And I think one of the nice things, kind of like Professor McGee was saying about 2020, and even before that is, and through the Bread Office at Vanderbilt as well, which has a lot of positive education for graduate students when it comes to like being an ally and being anti-racist and just about institutional racism as well, is that we had gotten the chance to kind of do that initial work and like see how as an institution there is still white supremacy and there is still a lot of racism. And so despite the fact that there's not really that much that we can do, we at least wanted to make sure that we were doing what we could to make our students feel safe, to make sure that they felt seen and included. And again, like there's not that much we can do, but you can kind of say that at any stage. So I feel like that's not really an appropriate excuse at this point in time. And it's kind of about doing what you can. So at the time, and Tiffany's still on the MPB Graduate Student Association, and I was at the time as well. And so we all kind of brainstormed things that we could do and came up with just putting up, this was actually during February at this point of this year. And so at the time it was Black History Month. And so we thought that we can at least highlight Black excellence in our department, so in physiology, and kind of bring the people, the Black people who have paved the way, who have contributed to our field and who have largely actually been either ignored or oppressed in the process and had to have made all of these contributions, but not really been rewarded for it. And so that's a big theme that we saw in the poster. And so once we decided to do that, we did a ton of research about it, started in, like you mentioned, Dr. Churchwell, the 1830s, going all the way to present time, and kind of highlighting the different Black scientists who have contributed to physiology in all the different ways. And we did try to highlight their achievements as well as their tribulations. So as well as the ways that they have been systemically, or the challenges that they had faced systemically in education. And a big part of that is to not have this like painted, you know, whitewashed history of everything was all rosy and things of that nature, but we did want to find a balance. And we actually drew Dr. Hinton into this initiative. And I'll let you describe a little bit about what you did, AJ, but I think that it was really amazing because in kind of broadening this, so once we brought AJ into it, he actually had the amazing idea to make it a bigger initiative, to have it be a Juneteenth celebration, because at that time, February had already come and gone. And you know, I think that you had a big frame of, or you had a lot of like a big network within the APS and within the Black in Physiology group that you were able to reach out to and kind of make it this bigger thing. And so what we were initially envisioning as just a large poster that we could put up in our department ended up being kind of this larger initiative where now we actually have people who have said, I've printed it out at my university and put it up on the wall. And so I think, to me at least, this has been, it's felt really rewarding to actually see the hard work that we have put into this benefit other people as well, and like see the tangible effects that it's had, even though they do at times seem like it, you know, it's never enough. But yeah, AJ, if you want to talk about that further.
Thanks, Lena. AJ, why don't you jump in? You certainly helped as a faculty member inspire them and also support this project.
So I thought it was a great project, and I really felt comfortable being a part of it because you could tell that it was authentic and it was coming from a place of love. And it was actually a really nice way to welcome me into the department, because I'm the first Black faculty in the department. And so it was really nice to just have a conversation about it on multiple different ways. So we did start with talking about the importance of the poster and maybe highlighting it on a larger stage. So we made some contacts with Black in Physiology, and we also made contacts with the APS board, and they were willing to back at both places. And so from that, we were able to include professors from other institutions that have done really well in physiology. For example, my previous boss, that's still my mentor, Dr. Edel Abel, who's in the National Academy of Science. And so a lot of people don't recognize that, you know, when people think of Black scientists, they only think of subpar scientists. They don't ever think of someone that has a H index of 90 or who has multiple R01s. They don't think that Black scientists can achieve. And so for people like him, Dr. Abel, you know, this is just something that he does. This is who he is, you know, just like any other scientist. And so this gives a change in how people are thinking about scientists when they Google search, you know, a particular scientist beyond what they read on the paragraph that's on the poster. And so I think it brings a conversation about talking about things on a larger scale, not only about allyship, and then also in the context of like how I can be an influence to others in my department, to be able to start recruiting with a more honest lens than just focusing on, you know, well, this person is of this color and this is the only reason we recruit them is because of, you know, equity hire. It's more about, you know, saying, hey, this person has a lot of talent. I think this individual may be diverse, but they're bringing a lot of good scientific merit. And so I think this is how we have to change the conversation. And we have to be willing to support others. And I think this poster is a start of that. And hopefully, you know, we can eventually expand it to other physiologists or even write a book in the future about physiologists that are doing well in the field and changing the field for the better. And then I also really like the fact that there are physiologists that are not noticed that don't have a PhD, for example, that have made a critical impact in the field, but are not recognized for what they do. And I think that's just as important because a lot of times Black scientists way back in the day were not able to acquire higher level of education because they were sought out as individuals to say, you cannot do this. They were impeding their progress. So they could not obtain a master's or a PhD even. So some of the greatest Black scientists that we don't know about do not have a PhD or even a master's. And so this kind of changes the narrative about how, you know, people are seen as prestigious if they have a PhD or able to cite a lot of papers. And so I think we really have to be careful about how we label scientists and what we think are very important. And so that's kind of what I have to say about it. And it's just an amazing opportunity to just, you know, be a part of something. And I'm always happy to help when appropriate for stuff with my time.
Thanks, AJ. That's great. You know, one of the things that happened pretty much after many consecutive months after the poster came out, a number of white faculty, both in MPB, biochemistry, and other of our basic science disciplines called up to meet with me to talk about, ask what they could do. And it's been amazing. And some have actually launched projects in their own areas of biochemistry and the like. And these are people that are, as Ebony said, clearly I could tell were authentic and are putting themselves out there using their social capital. They have more social capital than we do in these institutions to actually begin to build programs. So it's been very much a very positive thing. Let's hear Tiffany as a younger person in this group, the youngster in this group, and she's still in the department. Give me your take on it, and also what do you think could be coming attractions or kind of future ideas or projects there?
Yeah, so Swami and AJ did a great job in introducing what the impact we wanted to have with this project. And then also we wanted to create a space. I think Swami mentioned this about making it an included and heard space and a safe space in our department. And so throughout my own journey of scientific training, I've always been in spaces where I kind of had to ignore that I was an only in order to get through my day and come back again and to do work and excellence and contribute to the things I was doing. But I got to a point I felt like that the ivory tower became lonely when I was forgetting that I was starting to be an only. And then this poster really helped me in particular to realize that I was standing on the shoulders of giants. I might not see people who look like me, but there were people who came before me in order to create space for me to exist. And so being able to see individuals that look like me in my own department, in my own field, on the walls every day was really inspiring for me to be able to come back to the bench every day. And even though there might not be as high of a percentage of individuals who look like me in my own department or at Vanderbilt or in the field in general, there are people who are there and people who have done excellent things and that I can contribute as well as or as great as they have as well. And that we have the ability to feel seen and the ability to do great work. And so the things that we really want to continue in the department is showing throughout all levels of training that you belong here and that you can contribute excellently, like these people that are on the wall, even if they look like you or if they don't look like you. So with us, that started with some education. So the poster, you can interact with it and go to different pages on the poster and just learn about these things. And that's been really cool to see people take out their phones, use the QR code on the poster and continue to learn and continue to share things with other people, which really helped with the impact of the poster. And then also continuing some other education and roping in other parts of Vanderbilt that already have this great education systems in order to expose our department to that, to create a tradition of that education and showing that we want to learn and progress and create an inclusive space.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You know, a post like that, it helps you realize that you belong not just at Vanderbilt when you look at the timeline there, but you belong in the field of physiology. Isn't that correct? Mm-hmm. And as you stand there working and you don't see as many people as you'd like to see of your background or color, you are still standing on the shoulders of those on that poster and your family and everybody else who feels very strongly here at Vanderbilt that you belong here. So that's spectacular. Slavi, can you give us a little overview on the poster? How is it organized? How is it structured? Tiffany mentioned that there are certain codes you can click on and you can get more in-depth analysis there.
Sure, yeah. So the poster is organized. It has on kind of the top left and bottom left, there are QR codes for a full intro. So we just have a short intro on the poster. And obviously there was a lot that we wanted to say kind of about the history of this field, why we wanted to do this in the first place. And we didn't really have enough space, but we did want people to be able to go and read what we wrote. So we did that. We also have a QR code to a video that we created as an introduction, which was actually AJ's idea as well. So AJ, do you want to mention why we did that and how we set up the video?
Sure. It's a group effort, not just my idea, so just the group effort. The video was designed as a way so that people could interact with the poster, to have something of a feeling to attach to understand the importance of the poster and why we celebrate the spirit of having the poster. And then I'll let you finish the rest because you all carried out the work. You all recorded the individuals. This is not about me. This is about what you guys did.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, so we basically, once we had that in place, and that was really nice to actually be able to record the opinions and feelings of people throughout the department about Juneteenth specifically and about the poster. It was really nice because we did get perspectives from both people throughout the department, but also from people that directly contributed to the poster and that like worked on doing the research and putting it together. So both Tiffany and myself recorded blurbs about it. And so it was nice to just see the impacts that doing this work had. And then it was also nice to kind of mesh that together with the personal experiences of Black scholars across the different, I guess, like levels in academia. So we had people ranging from postdocs to staff to faculty members that gave their own perspectives and insights, which was really nice to hear. And then the poster chronologically goes through the timeline of Black physiologists that we wanted to highlight. And obviously we couldn't include everyone. And it was really hard to actually decide, you know, who to include. And it felt like every time that we did research about someone, we found 5 other great Black physiologists that we wanted to include. So this is by no means an exhaustive poster, an exhaustive list, but it is a good starting off point. And then we also have QR codes at the bottom that include references. So we wanted to make sure to allow people to have the information for where we actually got this material, because there is so much research that actually went into each of these people, especially like was mentioned previously, a lot of these physiologists, you know, didn't have their time in the spotlight, especially the ones that were further back in history. And so it was really hard to actually find information about them. And we have, so in the poster, we have highlighted in gold physiologists who are specific to Vanderbilt. And that proved to be really hard as well, because we wanted to highlight, you know, the first Black physiologists in our own department across the different levels. And for the staff members, for example, there really wasn't a lot of records. They didn't have faculty pictures or staff pictures of them, for example. So that was difficult to research as well, but we do appreciate all of the people who have kind of done that legwork for us that we were able to use. And then we also have a QR code for acknowledgements because, like AJ said, this was a huge group effort. And from the entire GSA that really researched this, put this together in terms of the scientists, it kind of kept like broadening out, and people had different ideas of ways that this could be made better. And it really helped to show like the advantages of having a collaborative mindset. And it turned out to be so much better than what I think we had initially envisioned and expected, and I'm really grateful for that.
That it's really important when you look backwards in time that they're to really acknowledge those early Black physiologists who, because of racism in America, some of it institutional at the Ivies or wherever it took place, were not allowed the opportunity to get advanced degrees, but were extraordinarily brilliant people. And you know, we know about the great example of Vivian Thomas, the Black physiology dog researcher that worked with Alfred Blaylock that helped develop the Blue Baby operation using dog models. But even here at Vanderbilt around that time or before, we had the Manlove brothers, and you guys uncovered a number of African-American physiologists at the staff level whose work was seminal and was equally as impressive and the daunting quality of their research and reaching those conclusions and doing those experiments was just as great as some of our more heralded PhD colleagues too. So AJ, you want to talk about some of those? You know, that is an issue. Some of us know about Ejust, the Black Apollo of science, but even Ejust is not that well known. And he was really a signally important African-American physiologist at the turn of the century.
So there's a lot of things I would like to start with. First, that thanks for bringing up Ejust. So I'm an Ejust fellow through the United Negro College Fund and Bristol Myers Squibb. And so it's very important to talk about this from a standpoint of understanding the legacy. So Ejust has been around as far as programming. You may have heard this across multiple institutions, and there's an Ejust Society that's out. But the key thing is to talk about the man behind the name. So he was an Omega. So if you're not familiar with the Divine Nine, he was part of a fraternity, and so that's important to say kind of how he built his community. If I was looking at him today, how he was able to actually get through some of the difficult situations that he went through. And he was a cell biologist, but also a developmental biologist. And he was very talented, and it's really such a shame that he was not able to actually use his degrees to teach at the higher level. So his education was at Dartmouth College and also at the University of Chicago. But what was also very interesting was that he died young as well. And so there was not as long a lasting legacy as we would have liked, as far as I'm concerned. But in general, he studied a lot of embryology. And so this is how he was able to actually start changing some of the things that we think about in today's society as well. And then in his personal life, he had some challenges with imprisonment. He had to go to Europe to be able to do his research, because here in the States, they would not hire him at the time. And so he was actually teaching at a high school, if I remember correctly. And he graduated with honors, from Dartmouth, which is an Ivy League. And then, it's just amazing that, they wouldn't hire him. And some of his earlier work, to be more precise, was in how individuals could picture and capture fertilization and egg development. So this actually shaped some of the things that are going on in the field today. And then what also was interesting about him is that when he was in Germany, he actually was captured. And so it's just something that we have to think about. And it was because of the plea of his father that actually his wife's father was be able to help him to get out of that situation. But if you think about it, he went through hardships in the U.S. and hardships in Europe. And so it's really sad, that he couldn't really focus on his work. And another reason he couldn't focus on his work, even though he was extremely dedicated, was the fact that he was not able to acquire funding. And so, this is a current situation that is still trickling down today. There's an article that's still, forgive me for paraphrasing, but it's basically about funding Black scientists. And so there's not a lot of opportunities for Black scientists to be funded. But if you can think about a pioneer not being funded and still being able to graduate from an Ivy League institution and still having research that's recognizable today and cited, what could he have done if he had the opportunity to actually acquire funding? He could have probably done much more and advance, science as a whole. We would know so much more, And although he graduated, with honors and he won special honors in zoology, he also was a distinguished botanist, and I would say he was a historian as well. And so we have to think about this as individuals become have identities in multiple fields. We have to realize that scientists share interests in multiple areas. And I want to go back to what Dr. McGee talked about, which I'm always impressed by her. I cite her all the time in my articles. And that's something that I think that we should also do, is we should champion for each other. One of the things she's talked about before is John Henryism, which I've cited in one of my recent articles. And it is a struggle to be an African-American scientist, or even a person of color in general. And so we have to be aware that when we have all of these opportunities to allow for individuals to be on committees, we have to kind of think in sight to let people do their research, or if there's some interdisciplinary work that they want to do, be able to celebrate that and to be able to record that as part of the tenure process. So that's important, just as important it is to get funding. So we have to be not only champions about the work, but also in collaboration to be able to get funding awards as well. Because again, Ejust's legacy lives on through the UNCF and other individuals that have made a society out of his name and what that represents to be a scholar like him. But there's so much more that he could have gave to the world.
That is spectacular. Boy, I really opened the door on that. That is spectacular, AJ. We have a few minutes left. Ebony, you listen to all of this, and one of the things we have not addressed, if you could give just a couple of minutes about Why is it that Black academics need allies? I mean, one of the things that we haven't talked about are the challenges African Americans face in STEM in general, just being on faculty of these highly resourced universities, such as the challenge of the brown tax, such as the fact that we do research in areas that quote unquote may not be viewed quote unquote as rigorous enough because they're in health disparities research. And we don't have enough mentors that follow along and give us advice as we're going through that. Can you share just a few comments about that?
Yes. And I just want to follow up on the conversation about history and how important it is to understand the history to really unearth the present residue that we have. So now I'm kind of working with the field of data science. And I found out, just through historical narrative that one of the first data scientists was W.E.B. Du Bois. And there's Ida B. Wells, and there's, with her anti-lynching project. It's hard to be what you can't see. And we say this to children all the time, but it's hard for me to be in a field where I can't see versions of myself in leadership positions, right? So when we think about the structure of the university, going back historically, one of the first statistics classes was taught in the late 1600s. My people were enslaved. Even if you go up past physics, past mathematics to computer science, the first computer science course was taught in 1962. My people were still under Jim Crow, right? So now you have the Civil Rights Act, and now all of a sudden that is supposed to erase all the historical oppression that occurred before that, right? So universities wear the residue of not just white supremacy, but militarism, particularly in STEM. That's what STEM was founded on. We want to be a super de-duper power, right? Military warfare, competitiveness, individualness, right? Innovation, but only by white males, right? So, when you go into a university department now, that residue still exists. And we need allies who get that, right? Get the power and privileges that they have and use it to make the university, make their department more equitable. So because of that historical legacy, we will continue to need allies. And we honestly, I was all for when I first started, like, let's just get all the Black and brown people together, we're gonna do this. No, we can't do it without our white allies, by our side.
Right. My father, the late Robert Churchwell, who's in the National African American Museum and Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., often told me, the problems of race relations in America will not be solved by Black people alone. It will require Black people working with colleagues across the board, a multi-ethnic panel. He said that back in 1965 to me when sitting around the kitchen table. I want to thank everybody again for this really impressive panel discussion and the tremendous insights that we all have gained from this. Thank you for sharing your information surrounding the subject. Remember, anyone can be an ally, but it does take work. True allyship means putting in the work, as Dr. McGee is saying. Being an ally is a lifelong endeavor too, that requires collaboration, a willingness to listen, and presence. Your actions speak volumes, as we said. Thank you all again for joining us. Thank my panel, spectacular comments, and have a great rest of the day.